Hello, my name is Kelly Clark, and this is my final presentation for ESL Lit Reading, Writing, and Grammar. And I'm going to talk to you today about reading strategies. Reading skills are ultimately achieved when instruction is meaningful and interesting, and this is for both first and second language learners. English language learners especially need to be supported because they need to be able to stretch their literacy skills to the next developmental level, and also they need to be able to participate fully. To maximize involvement in instruction, teachers need to provide social integration, that means collaborative learning, and teachers need to facilitate language retention, and that means them being able to remember what they read, comprehension skills. To do this, supplemental instruction and scaffolding are a must to support English learners. And to do this, reading strategies that are designed before, during, and after reading maximize their success. Research is really limited when it comes to ESL, except under Sheltered English Instruction, or SDAIE. And SDAIE is instruction delivered in English, and it's designed to be understandable to those students that have limited English. And it has two purposes: subject matter learning and second language development related to academic work. So it builds on students' prior knowledge, and it uses collaborative learning tasks and explicit instruction. And the experts, such as teachers, incorporate strategies in this that are successful with first language learners, and they modify it to meet those second language learners' needs. In teaching, it's very important in reading to, first of all, set a purpose for English language learners and all learners. They need to be able to process print, so processing print is very important. Of course, decoding skills are important. Comprehension of sentences and also connections between sentences. Do they understand what they're reading? Background knowledge of text. It includes self-monitoring during reading. And last, it includes metacognitive processes, things like inferencing and memory, which are strategies that readers use while they're reading to understand what they're reading. Assisting English language learners in this is critical, and there are some things that we can do to help them. The first thing that we need to do is be aware of their life experiences, become familiar with their interests and their aspirations. In other words, know them on a personal level. We also need to know how well they know English. What vocabulary do they know? What sight words, if anything? What knowledge do they have in English, the English language? We also need to know about their prior literacy experiences. Do they have only first language experience, or do they have some second language experience? So we need to know that. And of course, we need to know what they need growth in. They need to grow in language development so that they meet that next developmental level and keep growing. And we also need to know they need growth in print, which leads to the writing system. There are some pre-reading strategies that you can use with ESL learners to help. Some important steps are to, of course, motivate students. And all of these strategies really work with all students. However, you can modify them, of course, to work with ESL students. Motivating students with movies and field trips, getting them excited about what they're learning, building background knowledge, finding out what they know about the topic, and then building on that. Also setting and making sure students understand the purpose for reading the text. If they have a purpose and they know what they're looking for, that helps them monitor while they're reading. And also giving students explicit instruction on vocabulary and giving them those vocabulary strategies to support them in their reading. There are some practical pre-reading strategy applications that teachers can use in their instruction. First of all, they can take a field trip to the local museum or to a planetarium or a place that has to do with what they're teaching about, or show a YouTube video or a film on Discovery Ed. For instance, if you're talking about the Revolutionary War, which is taught in 5th grade, there are lots of films on Discovery Ed and YouTube that can help you build that background knowledge. Also, simulation games or activities, which is where they take a real life experience and as closely as possible recreate that, maybe designing a building or building a bridge. Using technology to enhance comprehension. There are websites out there that will help them with building background knowledge and getting them excited about learning about the content. Of course, there's experiments that you can do. Vocabulary, that explicit instruction for vocabulary is very important. Structured overviews, preview guides, anticipation guides, those are all things to help students anticipate what's going to happen. And then the KWL chart, what do you know about the topic? And then you make a list and have that available throughout the reading of the text so that you can refer back to it during the reading. One example that I found, and I like this very much, I'm going to try it in my classroom, is to create 1 to 2 questions related to the topic that you're teaching about. Have students sit facing each other, and you set a timer for 60 seconds and warn them this is all the time that they'll get. They take turns asking each other the questions and answering the questions, and then when time is up, you rotate students so that everyone has a new partner. You repeat this several times. That way your students are having the opportunity to work collaboratively. They're asking each other questions and answering questions. And they're also having the opportunity, especially ESL learners, I thought this would be very good for them to be able to hear different pieces of information and get different answers from students, and also be able to verbalize their answers and their thoughts about the topic. So I thought that was a very good example of a pre-reading strategy activity that you could use. After pre-reading, of course, they need to have strategies to use during reading. And this is very important. They need to be able to monitor comprehension based on the purpose for reading, which is set up by the teacher and or the teacher and students together. They need to ask themselves while they're reading, did I find what I was looking for? For instance, if the purpose for reading was to find 3 causes of the American Revolutionary War, did they find all 3 of them while they were reading? Or did they only find 2? Do they need to go back and reread? They need to be able to use the structure of the text to help in understanding things like subtitles and vocabulary and footnotes and captions under pictures. That's very important for them to use too. And they need to use some more of those self-questioning strategies. Some during reading strategies that can be used during instruction is to teach the students how to use headings and subheadings while they're reading in order to give them an idea of what they're going to be reading and to help them find information and answer questions. Using the direct reading thinking activity, which is where teachers model the reading and do a think aloud and talk to students and kind of ask questions and get students thinking about what they're reading that way. There's also guided reading, where small groups, the teacher guides them through questioning and reading and modeling that way. And then, of course, there's the request procedure, whereas the teacher gives students questions and gives them ideas for questions, basically teaches them how to come up with questions to help them understand what they're reading so that they answer the questions while they're reading. It's a procedure to help build students' independence in reading. There is contextual redefinition and preview and context for unfamiliar words. Clustering to develop vocabulary. There's the jigsaw procedure. Of course, there's learning logs. And then there's the W part of the KWL that you can use as a reading strategy application. One of the activities that I found was another collaborative reading approach. And you're basically photocopying the text, and you're cutting it diagonally into 4, and you have groups of 4, and you give each of the students in that group a piece of paper of the text. So each of them have their own piece of that text. They're not to show the others in the group. And you give that group a set of questions too. They have to work collaboratively to answer the questions because nobody has the whole text. And they can compare their answers when they've finished as a whole group. And I really like that activity again because it's collaborative. It's breaking up that text into smaller pieces. It's getting English language learners, it's giving them an opportunity to be able to verbalize and hear the information. And of course, it's a form of social interaction for them. So this I thought was a great activity to use as a during reading strategy activity. Post reading is where you take everything that you've done during reading and before reading and you put it together. Students organize the information. They have to be able to organize the information in such a way so that they remember what they've read. And collaboration and discussion is a very important part of this. Also, visuals and graphic organizers are very helpful in doing this too. Some post-reading strategy applications that teachers can use is, first of all, to do a semantic feature analysis. And this is where you take some traits and you have a list of the important parts of the concept, and they check off the traits that each of the words has within the reading. There's also mapping to summarize and rehearse information. You use a map or a graphic organizer to organize the information in the text, and then you summarize and rehearse it to other students, putting it into a verbal form, getting them to think about it in a different way or a way that makes sense to them other than just looking at the text. A Venn diagram, of course, is another graphic organizer. Reciprocal teaching is very effective. I like reciprocal teaching. The students actually teach each other, and that's important because they have to think about how to get the information across to another student in an effective way, much like a teacher does. Learning logs and journals is a way for them to actually practice writing and get the information down in writing. There's collaborative research projects where students work together to meet a certain goal or to come up with a certain plan. Maybe again, we're talking about comparing the British soldiers with the colonial soldiers in the American Revolutionary War. One side can take the American Revolutionary War colonial soldiers and they can do a project about those soldiers, and it's collaborative. And then of course there's the L part of the KWL chart, that is, what have I learned? And again, this is something that can be used all through the grade levels. I've used it in my classroom, and it is an effective way to have that very visual chart so that you can go back and refer to it, and you know what students know, what they want to know, and then of course what they've learned. One example that I found for post reading is just a very simple structure for students to write a summary, and it's using the phrase somebody wanted but so then. And again, it's a collaborative approach activity, and they're basically looking at somebody, who is the character. Want, what did the character want? But, what was the conflict? So, what did the character or the characters do to solve the problem? And then, how did the story end, or how was the problem solved? This is a great way to get students thinking about the story and to have them summarize it. You can also have them rehearse it and verbalize it to a partner or to a group. Nowadays, students are expected to read and write longer, more complex texts. They're looking at chapter books. They're looking at longer books. They are expected to be able to write about and compare those texts from upper grades to high school. and into college. So this is it's very important for students to understand the strategies and be able to have the tools that they need to be successful readers. And English language learners with their limited English proficiency, they need that support and instruction to help meet these goals. We have the Common Core standards, and they need to be able to meet those goals because they're in our school system just like the regular students need to. So we need to be able to support them and give them what they need. Pre-reading, during reading, and post-reading strategies are essential during instruction in the classroom, not only to help all students or first language learners, but to help English language learners connect and remember what they read. And we need to, as teachers, be able to scaffold and build instruction to meet the learning goals and needs of these students, as well as our first language learners. So if we're going to teach reading to these students, we need to be able to take what we learn in this class and in our ESL endorsement program and be able to apply that to our instruction so that our ESL students are successful. And I hope you've enjoyed this presentation. Thank you so much for listening.